All right, guys. Let's do some quick introductions for the crowd.
Hi, I'm Patricia Alon. I'm the Senior Digital Manager at Heineken USA, so I oversee all of our online media across our portfolio of brands.
I'm Jen Burch. I oversee the global brand media team at Hasbro.
And I'm Michael Cohen. I'm at Horizon Media. Been there 12 years. Oversee all biddable platform buying and digital partnerships.
Cool. I appreciate you guys taking my threat to keep your introduction short and sweet very, very seriously. So let's jump
everyone
into it.
wants to leave now.
Well, yeah, let's get right into it then. So how has the shift to these short form contents like YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels or TikToks really changed the way you approach your video advertising?
Yeah, I think we all have to kind of recognize and embrace that the video outlets are all fragmented right now. So we really have to really adjust based on consumer habits. And we're not going to be able to reach our target audience by only focusing on one or two of these platforms. So we have to run across all of these new platforms and also offer different creatives and video formats based on consumers' preferences as well.
Yeah, I think just to build on that, for us, we also know that both kids and adults are multi-stacking. So we talked and heard about this yesterday, where you're on the phone, you have a show on. I know my son is a very big gamer, so can help you out, Discover and Molly, if you ever need any tips and tricks. But he's regularly, on the Switch. He went through a Zelda phase where he was on the Switch playing Zelda, and he called it his setup, where then the TV was on and he was watching a YouTube video, watching other people play Zelda. He might have the iPad also on watching another one. And so how do we think about these connected experiences and using new formats and videos to really make sure that we're surrounding people where they are and how they're ultimately consuming?
I think that I would add to that setup. So what my daughters add to that setup is usually like a slice of pizza. Like it's not a setup without some kind of snack that's there or a drink that will spill. But yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point. It's like that would be one of the three things that I would think about there. And that's the three things are not an exhaustive list, but first one would be that stacking and really the notion of having a couple of screens, but also kind of like what that might give you from the standpoint of if you were trying to achieve reach and linear is expensive or larger format video is expensive. One of the things that you can look at is social at 1/5 of the cost, and you can still technically get at some of the same audiences. So for instance, if you're trying to buy premium, like you're trying to buy like premium in terms of like something that is high reach, more monocultural in terms of everybody experiencing it at the same time. So like I think about Marlo's presentation with Super Bowl. I think that there's an aspect there that's like, if you are paired with the right influencers and creators, technically you can kind of capitalize on those moments at the same time at a fraction of the cost. So I think that that's one thing. I mean, the part of what comes out of that is, kind of like an evolution of creative formats, or just like the welcoming of lower fidelity, kind of like lo-fi, rougher creative formats. And then the third thing I'd say is maybe, like an increasing bias toward performance and being able to optimize toward outcomes. Like I think that is something that scrollable TV, or that's, like your various social environments are going to hit hard on, just because of their conversion pixels being placed everywhere, the way that they train users. And I think that moves into, that winds up moving into the larger formats. Like the example of NBCU partnering with Kochava to kind of set up a self-attributing network for measurable outcomes feels like it kind of underscores that point a bit.
Let's click into the social element just for a little bit. And I'm actually surprised this hasn't come up yet. Like how are you guys adapting, or are you adapting your strategy in the event of what may or may not happen with TikTok? Like, are you thinking about that?
We definitely are. I think we're a little bit different from most companies here, just because we are so seasonally driven. So obviously our moment in first half is Easter. If you need toys, we have a lot of brands. Please buy some. So we really, had to really look at creators and activating on TikTok was going to be signed off on right as the news was coming and the shutdown was happening. And it was, do we take a risk? Do we sign off with all of these creators and potentially create content that's never going to be able to go live on the platform? Or do we scale back? And so we ultimately did decide to scale back. We will be running, actually it's live right now, Monopoly Expansions is our one and only brand that is live on TikTok right now, obviously to be reevaluated for the rest of the year. But it was, again, a decision of, do we go forward and potentially lock in for things that can't go live, or do we take a little bit of a risk, try a single brand? At the time, it was being reported that there was lower ad spend on the platform. So that was also really interesting to us. Like, why don't we run one brand, see if we can have less advertisers in the space for us, clear a lower CPM, which we all love, and test it out.
Yeah, I think for us, it's very different because alcohol brands weren't open to TikTok until last year. So launching on TikTok for us earlier this year was a huge win for us. So we're going to be out live on the platform for as long as we can. We saw great results from our Dry January campaign, and we're gearing up for Coachella. But in the case that it does go away, we have these contingency plans and we're going to shift to other similar platforms.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, we're seeing a lot of what Jennifer, you had touched on there, which is, I mean, there's I guess I should issue the standard agency disclaimer right now, which is like, it kind of depends on the client, or it depends on the industry. We have a large distribution of clients across a bunch of different verticals. So it plays out a little bit differently from what we're seeing. Like if TikTok, and on the performance side, if it's been a reliable driver of performance, brands are staying on it for as long as they can, because if you're getting $1 in, $1.10 out, or $1.50 out, then you keep playing with that. That's an easy, like, transactional calculation to make. In the instance, or like in as much as some brands are focused on mid to upper funnel objectives, and trying to think longer term, what we see is that a lot of brands crave, or not crave is the wrong way to put it, but like, it's predictability is meaningful. Like, that's an important thing to have. And so like, do you want to invest long term in a platform that's in terms of kind of like trying to understand what's going to come back, incorporating that into your measurement models, when you could potentially consolidate spend elsewhere, get extra value through a joint business partnership, all of those kinds of things. Like, those are real considerations that come into play. And they wind up having impacts. Like, I would say, at least with respect to brand spends, like, it's probably across the board, like, has a 20% impact in terms of investment that's kind of up for grabs is probably not the right way to put it, but dollars that would be reallocated.
Jen, Patricia, both of you guys talked about seasonality as part of your business, right? Dry January, Coachella, Easter, I imagine, like the holidays, right? Huge for the toy business. Do you guys approach scrollable TV as more like tentpole moments, like ebbs and flows with peaks, or is it an always-on strategy?
We're definitely only running during those seasonal moments. What we know is that for kids, like leading into holiday and your toy list time, that is critical for us. So we're going to start kid media around the October timeframe, when all of the catalogs start dropping and your children hopefully are starting to write out their list and tell you exactly what they want, which hopefully is all Hasbro branded items. And then from an adult perspective, we know that we need to make it easy for them. So we're set up a little bit differently than a lot of companies. I think we've done a real lot of work in the last 2 years of restructuring global media. So I have a counterpart. She oversees what we call performance retail. So that is all of our activations on our major retailers. So for the US, that would obviously be your Walmart Connect, your Roundel for Target, and then Amazon. And then I oversee everything that's kind of mid and upper funnel. And we would actually consider like TikTok not to be a performance channel. It's still a brand channel for me, because I can't actually know what the retailers are selling. It's a matter of me driving that traffic and knowing that a channel like TikTok is going to drive a ton of traffic to Amazon whenever we're activating on it. But we do look full funnel. And so that connection, we call it brand formance or split C's. We actually did a MediaPost event 2 weeks ago. You can probably look that up and see us talking about our split C's approach to media planning. But for adults, we know it's critical that we are driving new to brand consumers ahead of Q4, making it easy for parents to know your kid told you they want this exact item. You don't know what that means. Let's make it easy for you and show up and drive people through our brand efforts down into the performance retail efforts. And we've done a lot with like Amazon Prime, for example. So running through Prime's platform and booking Prime Video, I could see the touch points of a brand item and then what that means when our performance efforts interact with that and what outcome that ultimately drives. So again, bringing in new to brand, spiking searches of our products and our brands on Amazon. And then ultimately, am I affecting the ROAS of our performance efforts by having someone see our videos on top of it? And so that's kind of how we take our approach and run seasonally.
Yeah, I think we just focus on kind of like the key selling period for us. So it's just obviously the summer, but then we do have those tentpole moments like Coachella, F1, college football, but that all ties into kind of our master brand. So we'll have heavy up or different creative for those specific tentpole events.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the creative aspect. So, is there a type of content that's most effective for each channel? And then, how do you balance channel recommendations with your creative team and their nuances of what needs or has to be represented as they build the actual asset?
Yeah, I think for us, I think we see a lot of similarities across like all the video formats, especially if we look at vertical video. But you have to realize that each platform has a different need for each of the consumers. So that's where we really lean in on our partners to adjust our creative so it's fit for platform. And then we can optimize accordingly and see what works best for us. And right now, because there's so much content, whether it's influencer, we want to test organic or have our branded videos, we're trying to map out all of our content and really identify where the gaps are and where we kind of have to fill in so they all complement each other.
Yeah, we take a really similar approach. We do have a lot of creative teams because each of our brands has its own creative team. And it really honestly depends on the global brand team that we're working with, how much freedom that we have. But we as well feel fit for a platform is definitely where we want to be. We've shifted away from what we're saying influencers. We don't say that anymore from a media end. We're interested in creators. We want somebody who is authentic in their channel and popular on their channel to be able to bring our brands to life in a way that's engaging and natural to content that you would expect to see in the channel. We also partner with a lot of media partners to kind of, we call it adapt our creative so that it's fit for platform, knowing that we're going to be handed off kind of a global toolkit to utilize.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of the global piece, I don't think we always get video assets from global that make sense for the campaign. So, for example, with Coachella coming up, we were basically provided an animated static. We know that's not going to work on platforms like TikTok, YouTube Shorts, or Meta. So what we did is we really leaned in on our partnership with Coachella and utilized the footage that they took at the festival last year to create really digital first content. So we're really excited to see how that's going to perform. So we have that data to kind of test and prove out and share internally to start creating more of those assets moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's the mix too. What we're seeing is the global asset alongside, I call it creative media planning. So, where is the intersection between what a partner offers and can create for us in content? For Furby, last year we partnered with Moonbug and they created a whole animated series for us utilizing our Furblets and kind of doing a take on a get ready with me / like America's Got Talent. So each of the Furblets had their own kind of moment. They got ready and then they went on stage and did their performance. And it was really, that perfect intersection again of something of that brand representing self-expression and, your uniqueness and ability to be yourself with this compilation that this partner was able to produce for us in animated content was just really remarkable. And so how do we think of that alongside that standard ad that's going to actually tell you about the brand and the product and the features that it actually comes with?
I haven't thought about Furby in like 20 years, and it still kind of gives me a little nightmares. I'm not going to lie.
It's back.
Michael, what about you? Do you think there's a particular like length or format that works best when it comes to scrollable TV to kind of help cut through the clutter?
I mean, I think that I feel like what we're increasingly seeing, and I was going to ask you two about this, is we're seeing I guess, a convergence of creative, creative approach, at least across the scale platforms. So your Metas, your TikToks, your YouTubes, and Shorts, and things like that. And so, I think that one of the key things, and here's the thing, I'm sure you can tell that I struggle with, but those 3 key things: be brief, be funny, be clear. Like, if you can hit those, you can probably, whether you're doing like more of a UGC or just simply a UGC style that's brand, I think that you can have a bunch of success there. But I think that that's for those particular platforms, we see more of a convergence of creative approach. For platforms where you can have video, but they're just different, you kind of got to lean into what the biases of the platforms would be. For instance, like if you're going to try to put video that's worked on TikTok on Pinterest, you're unlikely to have success. Yeah. Like you really need excellent photography for something like Pinterest. Like if you want to put video on Reddit, you can, and it can work. But I think that and certainly it makes sense for lots of visual brands, but the text is really, I mean, that's the currency on something like Reddit. And if you don't build for those, if your formats are just not conducive to the, to what's native in the platform, you're just not going to have as much success.
Yeah. Let's do another rapid fire. The audience knows I love these so much. So quick 1-word answers. Do you prefer UGC or brand produced content on this scrollable TV?
I'm going to go with the branded content.
Yeah, I think it depends on the channel. But
1 word, Jen. 1 word.
On TV, branded. Social, UGC.
Okay.
This was for Scrollable?
Yeah.
I'm going to say UGC if you can make it. If it fits for the brands. The last thing that you want, Erin, is like, for the same reason that I don't go around to my buyers and use terms like, no cap and bet. Like sometimes that's just not going to work for particular brands, So I think that and plus I don't want to push. I don't want to make them feel
be brief, Michael. Be brief.
I don't want to make them feel more uncomfortable than they would already be. So like if it's not going to work, you don't need to push that.
I was like, we'll take all those videos. Anything that says Sigma and Riz, we're probably speaking to the generation I'm targeting.
All right, so let's start with the UGC side of stuff, right? Michael, Patricia, how do you balance your brand guidelines when you give creative control to the creators themselves?
More important for Patricia to go first on that one.
Well, she said brand produced is what she wanted. So really, y'all said UGC.
I did say that, but I'm also kind of sitting off to the side as far as like, what am I going to get? Because I do think that it's something that a lot of brands are going to struggle with. I think that you'll only get the creative's only going to do so well if you're trying to push too hard on like what the talking points would need to be for the brands. I mean, this is not especially helpful in terms of advice for brands, but like in as much as there's, you can kind of go minimal on the guidance to allow for, creators to do what they do best. You're probably going to get creative that resonates a little bit more. I mean, that's probably pretty obvious. Does that work for, Fortune 10 brands that we work with? Maybe
not.
Not so much. And like for that, it's just not going to be relevant.
Yeah. I think that is incredibly important, though. We struggle with this a bit as well. Just again, like having global brand teams have a lot of feelings about their brand and their look and feel. And we do provide really clear guidelines whenever we're partnering with creators, but it is just imperative to let them do their own thing. Like there is nothing worse than you partnering with someone and then over forcing the brand fit. It comes across in the video that they ultimately end up creating. Like it's so critical to give them guidance and let them run. They know what resonates with their audience. They know why the people are following them. And that is why you partnered with them, was to get after their following. So we try as best we can to actually take more of a back seat, as long as they're not being offensive, they're on brand, and they have our 2 talking points. We tend to let them kind of do their own thing. Like there's been so many times where I've watched something and I'm like, like it's all right. Like I don't know that this necessarily knocked out of the park, and then it'll end up being our top performing asset. So you just never know.
Yeah, I think with that too, that's why it's super important to pick influencers or creators that really align with like your brand ethos, so you don't have to give like that much prescriptive direction. So it's a little bit more authentic.
So, and Patricia, you said the brand produced content is what you would prefer. Is there ever a scenario that you would lean more into the casual UGC style?
I think that's where we have the opportunity to test more organically versus paid. But I think what we're trying to transition to is kind of testing how organic does with the paid, just not even from an amplification perspective, but like as a creative rotation within the mix. Because if so, then we can, save money on assets and asset creation, things like that. And we can swap in creative really quickly and create assets a little bit faster.
All right, let's move out of the creative discussion and into our next favorite conversation, measurement. KPIs. How are you guys measuring success? What do you look at?
We look at the end of the day, obviously, like most of us in this room look at MMM, but I think with that, we're trying to create a ton of different assets so we get the read. So we understand how traditional is doing versus digital first versus influencer versus organic. So we get those results, but then obviously we'll look at brand lift, but then also front end metrics like VCR engagement rate to understand what's resonating with the consumers.
Yeah, I think we're probably one of the most unique ones that MMM doesn't really work for us. We're so seasonally relevant, and we're such a big house of brands that won't necessarily always be continuously supported, that MMMs have been very difficult for us to get a read other than, hey, your upper funnel works. Like, great. Appreciate that vote of confidence. At the end of the day, I would love to sit here and I feel like I need Molly's job. Like if I could get away with just pushing an eCPM, like that would be my dream. I am held to sales. Ultimately, I know, right? On kid media, which is incredibly hard to measure because you can't do that much with it. So on the adult end, I kind of touched on how we're looking across the funnel and looking at how does brand impact performance efforts, and do we see uptick in new to brand consumers, search lift on retail platforms, but also did we affect the ROAS? On the kids side, it's extremely difficult. You can't legally target children. You can't legally collect anything on children. And so we're really reliant on, what did brand lift look like? A lot of panels also don't even talk to children. They talk to adults. So you have to use them as a proxy of a parent answering on behalf, which I'm sure you all can say. How does that ever work as a parent thinking that you understand what it is that your kid is actually interested in, would actually say on a paneled answer? So we've started looking more at attention. We utilize brand lift as both the parent-led and the kid-led. And then we're looking at standard media metrics. So like video completion. We do know that the more time kids interact with our brands, the more likelihood that we're going to see the sales come through. So for us, it's about the engagement score, video watch time.
Jen, I did last week just replace my Monopoly deal set. So you're welcome for that sale. I don't know if I saw it on a scrollable TV, but I think that's like the best innovation in gaming that I have ever seen is Monopoly deal, truly. Unaided awareness.
Expansions is also out now. You're going to want it. It shortens your Monopoly time.
Oh, man. All right. Last question before we open it up to the audience. How do you guys see social video evolving? What trends are you keeping an eye on? Michael, we'll start with you.
Ooh, that's good. So I'll keep it to one thing, Erin. I mean, I think that one thing to keep in mind here is like with the emergence of like Gen AI, LLMs like getting integrated more closely with the platforms, what that does to all platforms, and in particular social platforms, is going to make them stickier because there are just more use cases for any individual to see a thing, do a search that is multimodal in nature and be able to get something that is like that comes back. So like all of them become like, if they were already performance focused, they're that much more performance focused. And so, like if you thought about that just in terms of like implications for creative, there's that be brief, be clear, be funny. I think that there's you almost don't necessarily need to say as much potentially over some point in time, because you've got that loop right in there in terms of, what, the platform knows what ads you've been exposed to. So if you need to come back and search later for more information and things like that, that's just one tab over, so it is, it's not as much a thing now. But it that will be. And then I think also the AI, my bonus one would just be probably a lot more AI generated creative. I think that's kind of the last frontier. For your Metas and TikToks. I think they've done fairly well on the, your text-based things, your headlines, your calls to action. The video piece is harder to do. I think we'll wind up seeing a lot more of that, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, I think personalization of testing different segments is really interesting. And even, just changing small nuances within, whether it's, changing items out or really tailoring the message to a different audience is something that we're really testing and digging into this year. I think too, just creators, I think that's the opportunity of the cultural relevance piece. We're not going to try to insert ourselves into a trend. It's really where, when we're briefing the creator and letting them kind of own that and authentically tapping us into the conversation, than us trying to take credit for getting into a trend.
Yeah, I think creators for us as well, just tapping into other creator communities across the different platforms. But I think too, additional sponsorship opportunities, whether it's on TikTok or Meta, to help align to our tentpole events, making sure we have that 100% share of voice when people are looking at F1 content or festival content, for example. So really focusing on those.
Questions for the panelists. This is your final opportunity, guys. You only get one shot, one opportunity to use everything you ever wanted. No one knows this. Is anyone laughing about my Eminem reference?
Is that Eminem?
We're with you on 8 Mile. We got you.
Of course. I'm Molly from Discover. Question, Heineken, Hasbro, very different audiences, but very difficult to reach and a lot of legalese, I'm assuming. So when you guys, I know, Patricia, you said you prefer brand-led content, which I totally understand, but how are you guys dealing with UGC and working with influencers and things like that, but staying within the legal guidelines that you guys need to do?
We have a great PR agency that helps vet our influencers. And we have a very responsive legal team too. No, but I will say, obviously, again, we have to make sure that these influencers really align with our brand messaging and what we really stand for, because that just makes it easier for them to create content, and making sure we align. And also too, I think we're testing out, because we have all of these different tentpole events. Do we have those consistent influencers that we run throughout the year versus staggering them out, having different ones for US Open versus F1 versus Coachella? So we have that consistent thread throughout the year.
Yeah, I would say, just to build on what you're saying, I also have really great relationships with my legal team, because we are so heavily regulated. So usually I do what I like to call, I'm laughing because my colleague is here and she always comes to me and she's like, "Are you okay with this?" And I'm like, "We're just going to do that one and we're just going to let it go." But it's, within reason. I would say, I think our creator briefs come with more of the legal lines and watch outs than the actual brand guidelines. The brand guidelines are this big, and then it's a legal list like this of things you can and cannot do and cannot say. And we try to just make sure that that is all included from the start so that the creator is fully aware of what they're getting into.
Ryan again, thank you. And if I always say it's must-see TV. If the Colbert, Wheat Thins, Mondelez brief, it's really quite funny if anyone needs a funny 3-minute video on their flight home today. So it sounds like you guys give a lot of creative license to creators, which is fantastic, understanding those channels. I'm wondering, just out of pure curiosity, when you're going to a TikTok or other publishers, do you ever ask, or do they have any say in terms of creative guidelines, any weigh-in? Obviously, there's a lot at stake as well, too, keeping brands on platforms, brands happy, brands coming back. Are they a part of the creative? Obviously, you know your brands really well, and if Horizon know all your brand of portfolios really well. But I'm wondering if on the publisher side of things, outside of T's and C's, things that can air, cannot air, of them knowing their platform and their audience as well too, and as a give back.
I think for TikTok specifically, like because alcohol is such a new vertical on the platform, we have to get landing pages, we have to get creative approved before we can launch our campaign. We can't run influencers. We can run, there's a lot of guidelines. So that's why you have to go through all those approvals on TikTok. For the other platforms, not so much. I think we share creative with them to get kind of best practices and understand if we have to tweak it to make sure that it performs well for us. But I think TikTok is like the only kind of limiting platform for us right now.
I would say yes, absolutely. If you have creative best practices, we want it. So what we normally do as a media team is we'll share half learnings, and we share them to our global brand teams to better inform the toolkit that they're going to be producing for the next half. So if there's anything where that we can basically say, like from a media standpoint, please deliver us better assets so that they're going to run in our buys appropriately, we definitely want to be doing that in advance. But we do look to a mix as well of running the branded content versus what might be something a bit more sophisticated and fit for platforms. So we would rely on that point on the partner to co-produce the asset with us that would run alongside.
Yeah, the publishers will, if I'm getting your question right, they will come forward with recommendations. And if I may mention it before, like increasingly, I think a lot of those recommendations, at least from the scale platforms, like look and sound pretty similar to one another. And, it's like accordingly, like a lot of the features themselves seem to be features, formats, et cetera, all seem to be converging, on those. So I think that there's like, I don't know, there's a need in a lot of ways to be able to woo creators so that you can improve engagement on your platform. Like if you're a platform owner in that particular case. And so there's, a bias toward something that's going to help that. Like I'd say that like what's been interesting, I'm sure you guys have seen it, is like TikTok over the past few years is kind of what you had seen for years and years is that your like organic reach on something like Meta would be limited. And so you would need to be able to supplement that with paid. And so that's a good platform. Like that's a good way of going when you're the only game in town. With TikTok coming in, like I think that they were able to, as like a disruptive strategy, just reward a lot more organic creation. And so that's kind of like that upsets the levels of like how a TikTok's going to come to play, and how a Meta would come to play there. So like if you start to see similar recommendations around like that lo-fi, like kind of like that lo-fi creative and a bunch of creator tools that help with stuff like that, like it's pretty natural evolution.
All right, Patricia, Jen, Michael, thank you guys so much for bringing us home today.